Good evening. My name is Madeleine Day Delpha, and I am the Assistant Director of Programs and Community Engagement at the Rose Art Museum. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Spring Surrealism Sneak Peek program. I invited our director, Gannit Ankori, to come talk with us tonight about what we can expect to see on view this winter and spring at the Rose. We have three very different exhibitions on view. The first is a solo show by contemporary artist Hugh Hayden. The second is a collection of surrealist works, both historical and contemporary, from the Rose's permanent collection. And the third is a focused solo exhibition of paintings and works on paper by Leonora Carrington, a pioneer of the surrealist art movement, who fled war-torn Europe in 1940 and found refuge in Mexico, where she developed her own unique artistic vision. Although these exhibitions differ in terms of medium, setting, and era, there are overarching themes that link them together, which we thought would make for an interesting conversation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gannit Ankori, the Henry and Lois Foster Director and Chief Curator of the Rose Art Museum and Professor of Fine Arts and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Brandeis University. Gannit, thank you.
Thank you, Maddie, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. Let's start with Hugh Hayden, Homework, which opened in September and will be on view until June 1st, 2025. So Homework, the artist's first solo museum exhibition in New England, presents a comprehensive survey of Hayden's prolific bodies of work created over more than 10 years, so over a decade. And I curated this exhibition with my lovely colleague, Dr. Sarah Montross, the Chief Curator of the De Cordova Sculpture Garden and Museum, the trustees. So Hugh Hayden, born in Dallas, Texas in 1983, is one of the leading artists of his generation. His meticulously crafted sculptures, hybrid forms, and installations evoke poignant reflections on the human condition within a complex, volatile, and often threatening world. Hayden combines probic scrutiny of serious and often painful topics with humor, visual puns, and wordplay, provoking a unique blend of visceral and critical responses from viewers. So the show features artworks that morph into everyday domestic items. These domestic items become through his magical artistic practice, enigmatic and threatening objects. And much of the work presented in this show and in our other shows, as we will see, aligns with Freud's concept of the unheimlich, the uncanny, that is, objects that induce surprising responses to commonplace spaces that have been transformed into disorienting terrains. The works address our deep-seated longing for security while also confronting the realization that discomfort and even danger often lurk within the confines of our very own homes. The work that you see here and here from a different angle is called Hedges from 2019. And this installation features a model of a generic, very familiar suburban home, but rather than associating the domestic with security, Hayden transforms the familiar abode into an unsettling place where menacing branches sprout from and overpower the structure's walls and windows and roof. It's experienced within a mirrored chamber, which is like an infinity chamber. So it situates the viewers, the audience, amid this strange terrain, this uncanny place confronted with this threatening house. And I just want to say that the house is a little too small, so it's a model of a house, and this scale, discrepancy in scale also provides this weird feeling, almost like a Alice in Wonderland feeling, where the house, instead of being large, is smaller than you expect.
And Hedges is part of a section of the exhibition titled The Uncanny Home. And we're going to look next at another section titled Skeletons in the Closet. The phrase skeletons in the closet captures both literal and figurative allusions. So within this designated space, the open doorway suggests a walk-in closet, and we have several skeletons crafted from particular types of wood prominently displayed. So we have Eden from 2022, which was recently acquired for the Rose Art Museum's permanent collection, and presents two interlocking rib cages carved from cedar and suspended on hangers from a mundane clothes rack. And American Gothic from 2024 features a couple whose limbs are entangled with their work tools, both agricultural and domestic.
Yeah. So these skeletons in the closet, garments, accessories, jewelry are kept in a closet, but so are secrets, desires, hidden aspects of one's identity, and buried shameful histories. So here we have a hybrid. This is called Scarecrow, but it's a luxury coat, a Burberry coat that morphs into bark, hybridizing nature and upscale consumer culture. Nearby, we have a closet within the closet. It's called High Cotton, and it's a Chippendale style armoire that turns into an arcade game filled with cotton balls and lined with mirrors, creating endless reflections of that connect to America's dark, repeated past. So instead, this is a kind of arcade grab. Instead of grabbing a toy, one grabs or picks cotton, which of course is a quintessential act of slave labor in American history. Another work that we showed you before is American Gothic. If we discuss slave labor in related to picking cotton, here American Gothic also relates to American history. He merges two skeletons carved of wood, so beautifully handmade wooden skeletons, and they are linked with these domestic and agricultural tools. And through these, he really interrogates labor, the dignity of work, and some of the exploitation of people who are seen as menial laborers. He also deliberately positions himself as part of a genealogy of American artists, referencing both Grant Wood, his 1930s American Gothic, and Gordon Parks' 1942 photograph, American Gothic, which has this woman with the mop and broom that is, you can see how he's seeing it as part of the part of this conversation. And Maddie, you had some ideas about this work as well.
Well, with this work, it feels as though when you're viewing this piece that we've become hybrid creatures whose limbs are fused with the tools of our labor. And these hybrids, of course, evoke surrealism, but also capitalist attitudes towards manual labor. And we wanted to include it because of the surrealist elements in Hayden's work include, as you mentioned with Hedges, a sense of disorientation in familiar spaces, but also this suggestion that the rational mind and the visible world aren't sufficient to express our lived experiences. So let's transition with that to the next exhibition, Surrealism's Then and Now. And Gannit, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about this exhibition.
I'd be happy to. So first of all, this show I co-curated with my colleague, Chad Sirois, and the artworks in the exhibition are drawn from the Rose Art Museum's incredible permanent collection. They span over a century of surrealist-inspired practices. So these painting collages, photographs, and sculptures originate from diverse geographies and cultures, but they share common sensibilities. They articulate ambiguous spaces, fluid or fractured boundaries, hybrid creatures, and mainly unrestrained imagination. Many were produced by artists associated with the Surrealist movement, launched in 1924 with the publication of André Breton's Surrealist Manifesto. So 1924 is our starting point.
So we're celebrating the centennial of Surrealism.
Yeah.
A bit late.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not really late, just in time. Yeah, so we have these historical surrealist artists, but we've also included contemporary works that reveal surreal elements. So whether evoking dreamlike visions or investigating the nature of perception itself, the works in the exhibition reveal art as a tool for world making, a means to explore knowledge, unravel mysteries, envision transformative understandings of the unknown. Um, so art that really visualizes realms beyond seen, visible, everyday reality.
And one of the connections that I immediately saw between the work in this exhibition and the work of Hugh Hayden are the very uncanny and sometimes menacing landscapes, like this next one that we're going to see.
Yeah. So I think this is part of why we have such distinct exhibitions, but we saw them as a cluster, a suite of exhibitions that have certain threads that connect them, even though they are so very, very different. Uh, Magritte's title uh, borrows from Pierre Benoit's novel L'Atlantide. And like the French adventure fantasy, it opens onto parallel and still partially hidden worlds. So disrupting a smooth expanse of black, which you see on the right, one corner of the painting pulls back to show a stepped pathway to a flipped dimension. And I flipped it for you so that you see this section upside down is another flipped dimension, steps leading to another world. Magritte conceals as much as he reveals, and beneath the curtain of this architectural landscape, we see, for example, draped fabric. It cloaks this rounded, mysterious form, and we don't know what it is. But some of the mysteries were solved over the years and also with the help of technology. So I think you see here that some of the paint, the black paint, seems to be peeling. And a while back, the Rose had it x-rayed, and this is what we found. We found that in the original way that Magritte conceived it, there were two figures seated within this bathtub, facing each other. And, this rectangular frame, and within the bath waters, you had these two figures. In the final version, he decided to just have this black area and not to have that. But, L'Atlantide is a series of riddles wrapped within mysteries. And, we wonder which side is up, should we flip it? We hang it this way because of the signature, but it could be hung in both ways.
And I think it's really fascinating to imagine how different the painting would be if Magritte had decided to include these bather figures. I think it's much eerier this way because we're in this abandoned place and it's very, as you mentioned, it's very disorienting. We're not sure which way is up. And these very kind of disquieting, dreamlike dreamscapes are really one of the hallmarks of surrealism. And we're going to look at another one here by Yves Tanguy.
Yeah, and I think that the depopulated landscapes uh, are the ones that are mysterious, eerie, and also seem threatening to us because it also implies that you, as the viewer, maybe can step into here and be all alone and
Right.
threatened. But I'm really, really happy to show our Yves Tanguy, and reproductions don't do this work justice, I have to say. So Yves Tanguy saw Georgia de Chirico's paintings for the first time in 1923, and that's what inspired him to be an artist. We're thrilled that we are going to show our De Chirico work in the exhibition in a very prominent place. So De Chirico really inspired a lot of these artists. He was a precursor of Surrealism when in 1917 he founded the metaphysical art movement. And even Breton, who liked to claim himself as the high priest of Surrealism, said that De Chirico was a sentinel, the one who preceded him. So in 1924, right when Breton launched the Surrealist movement, Tanguy joined the movement, and during the 1920s and 30s, he exhibited his paintings alongside works by Jean Arp, Max Ernst, André Masson, Juan Miró, and other artists whose work are also accompany this work in our galleries. So you'll see all of them. Tanguy later married fellow surrealist Kay Sage and moved with her to the US in 1940 and painted these very distinct dreamscapes that we immediately recognize now that they're ambiguous spaces because the light is stunning and beautiful, but you can't tell if it's dawn or dusk. You don't know. The barren terrain seems oddly fertile, and the lush morphologies suggest both inanimate and animate objects, sort of hybridized geological and anthropomorphical forms. So it looks like it's a place that you might be able to step into because there is this perspective, but then I don't know if you'd want to, right, Maddie?
Yeah, it reminds me actually of a quote that Hugh Hayden used when he describes his artwork. He says it's seductive but difficult to inhabit. And I think that describes this painting too. The colors of the sky are so beautiful and they draw us in and they're really rich and lovely. But then, I don't know what to make of these figures. Like you said, they're kind of geological and anthropomorphic, and it kind of feels like we're on maybe like an alien planet or some kind of strange imagined world. But, one of my favorite things about this exhibition is that you're pairing works like this, works from 20th century surrealist painters with contemporary artists who are still working with the same concepts. For example, we have this piece by Tracy Moffat.
Yeah, yeah. So, so that was one of the concepts that's why the subtitle is Surrealisms in plural, then and now. And this Tracy Moffat is part of her Invocations series. We have the entire series of silk screens. They're incredible. They're also large, so when you look at them, it's like stepping into these attractive, repulsive, ambiguous spaces. And her work is based on dreams, visions, fairy tales, and horror films. She kind of brings us into her imaginary universe that's both seductive and frightening. And she herself linked this and other works from the series directly to the surrealist art movement. Um, Now, there's several uncanny stories that dominate the series, and you have the subject of a little girl lost in a haunted forest, and it taps into what the artist herself explains as, and here I quote, she says, "The dark underworld that we all have, the murk in all of us, the subconscious." End of quote. So you see how directly it aligns with historical surrealism, tapping into the unconscious. Now, Moffat was born in Australia to a white father and Aboriginal mother, but was placed in foster care with a white family at an early age. And a lot of the uncanny and the frightening and these, the predicament of this vulnerable little girl relate to the scars of her own childhood, the sexism and racism that Indigenous women, including her, faced in Australia, and the instability of her home life. So her art finds personal experience. The surrealism is used to evoke these personal experiences as well as general sentiments that we all have. Our world is threatening, and we all have imaginations and other things we cope with.
And I think we have some details, yeah, here we go, of the anthropomorphic trees, which have eyes that are watching this little girl while she sleeps.
Yeah, and for me, that made this seem like almost like we see the little girl, and what we see around her is her own dream, her subconscious. That's one way of seeing it. But the eyes in the trees, reminding us, of course, of the Ents in and different mythologies and um, occult traditions where objects are animated in strange ways.
And eyes are a motif that we see repeatedly in this exhibition.
Yeah, yeah. And Chad Sirois, my co-curator, and I had a lot of fun with it. Um, we brought a few examples, Maddie and I. One is this William Basiotis, an American surrealist artist, renowned for painting with these biomorphic forms. This is the Night Watch. He later became affiliated with the abstract expressionists as well. But here on the left figure is a humanoid figure, obviously, with this round circle and this triangle. So although these are abstract shapes, we read this as the, how shall I say, the 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 kind of the vaginal area of the torso, or the bottom part, the sexual parts of the figure, and the round circle is the eye. So this is a cyclops, and cyclops, the mythical Greek figures. The etymology is actually round eye, circle eye. So the one-eyed ogre here seems to be looking out, but also be vulnerable as well. And this ties in with Freud's interpretations of the gaze and its relationship to sexuality and power. And that really, really interested the surrealists and Basiotis also. So the genitalia that I referenced here, and I wasn't thinking of the correct word, so please excuse me for using other terms, anchors the work in the body, corporality, and it highlights the link between vision and eroticism. Um,
So we have
Maddie?
this, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, you're describing voyeurism, we're watching someone who maybe knows they're being watched and maybe doesn't know they're being watched, but being watched, it can be thrilling, but it can also be really disturbing. And that kind of tension, I think, is really interesting. And you also have included in this exhibition contemporary works who are still working through some of these same ideas of voyeurism and surveillance, like this next one.
Yeah, yeah. So sorry for jumping the gun, but the next one is Mona Hatoum, where it's actually her eye, and it's a single eye, which and it's also kind of flipped 90 degrees. So disorienting because obviously it's an eye, but at first, it almost looks like a vagina rather than an eye. And her work consistently grapples with themes of authority and autonomy and exile. And she's also directly influenced by surrealism. And this oversized eye appears both as a permeable orifice, but also as a tool of perception that penetrates the world. So it's this double edge, this fluidity between being the watcher and the watched, which you mentioned before, is visible here as well. So the eye simultaneously pierces and is pierced. It's the site of power and peril. And I just feel that it's really vulnerable. There's something really vulnerable about this close-up of the eye, but then the eye also does the watching. And Hatoum's imagery aligns with the surrealist transformation of familiar objects into something unsettling, uncanny, almost grotesque here, because this is like a huge eye and it's a single eye and it's 90 degrees turned around. But, the British Palestinian artist uses some of the surrealist preoccupations with bodily forms and their intersections with desire, fear, and alienation to maybe think about contemporary narratives of surveillance, exposure, and empowerment, and also vulnerability. So she takes it to other places, although it's part of this. And we have all these incredible eyes that speak about the gaze, speak about vulnerability. And this is one of the creepiest works we have in the show. And to my knowledge, it's the first time we're ever showing it. This is by Dorothy Cross. Um, she's an Irish artist, actually very well known in Ireland, and represented Ireland at the Venice Biennale in 1993. And all her work really explores the liminal spaces between the seductive and the repulsive, the conscious and the unconscious, the real and the imaginary. So the eyeballs look real, but floating this way, it looks very, very weird. And it also, as we said, as you hinted, Maddie, it echoes the disembodied eye motif that we have throughout the exhibition. And I want to say that we were thinking also about sight and insight,
Mhm.
about what is envisioned and what is a vision. So surrealists then and now, and people working in that vernacular are looking at what we can see, but also trying to use art to show what cannot be seen. So vision becomes, and sight and insight become these really, really powerful tropes that you'll see throughout the exhibitions and work after work, and it's pretty remarkable the works by Masson, works by others, etc.
Yeah, I have to say I'm so excited to see this sculpture in person because this sculpture immediately makes me think about body horror, which I was also thinking about when you were describing the Mona Hatoum. And I think, at its root, body horror is about our fears about losing control. And, this is a very disturbing sculpture, but in another way, it's a very placid sculpture because it's really just these orbs, floating on the surface.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe now I should mention that one of your program initiatives is a series of horror films that relate to some of Hugh Hayden's works. You may want to say when the series starts, because I
It
don't remember.
it kicks off on February 13th because I like horror movies for Valentine's Day.
Okay,
But it
so
relates to Hugh Hayden's work, and it also relates to a lot of the work that we're discussing tonight. So
yeah.
hopefully people will join us.
And I don't want to get into it, but Freud's interpretation of eyes and the gouging of eyes and Oedipus's gouging of eyes relates to a fear of castration that was very, very seminal in the historical surrealists' work. So thinking about losing your eyesight,
Hmm.
but also thinking about prophets and seers as often blind because maybe they couldn't see external reality, but they could see these internal mysterious visions. I think we have one more a contemporary work that uses eyes in a different way. Um, One of our recent acquisitions that I am just crazy about this painting. It's knock dead beautiful. It's by Have Karaman, and it's called A Bed of Eye Mortars. So eyes are actually in the title. So Have Karaman, for those of you who don't know this incredible artist, she was born to Kurdish parents in Iraq, and she was 10 when the family found refuge in Sweden as political refugees, and then she relocated to the United States, and lives in California, Los Angeles, actually. So I'm like hoping that she's okay with all these fires and the horrors of being a refugee, the horrors of losing another home, maybe to a fire. I mean, um, this double exile, though, I think continues her sense of diasporic non-belonging. And all we're thinking of all our friends in California who are in harm's way and hoping that they are doing as well as they can do. But in this work from 2022, we see that, and in other works from this series, we see that the violence and war and displacement, racism, misogyny that dominated her formative years find expression in her art. You don't rid yourself of such traumas. And A Bed of Eye Mortars, the bed that you see looks like almost like an oriental carpet, comes from the Middle East. And the eye-shaped mortars that you see here reference decades of violence that decimated Iraq, still a country that needs a lot of rebuilding. The female figure, which is in a way a symbolic and collective self-portrait of non-white women, is observed from above. So we are implicated by looking at her from above, kind of as a presumed viewer who's in a position of power that might objectify the woman. Moreover, look at her bare limbs. They're contorted in a way Look at those hands and the legs, and they're also bound by these snake-like strips. So we see the difficulty and the domination of this woman, but her gaze she returns the gaze, again, the eyes, and there's a force and resiliency in the way she's looking. I want to take this to a little broader term and say that the motif of the reclining nude, or the odalisque, has dominated art history for centuries, and it reflects the Western male fantasies about exotic and erotic Oriental women. And here, Karman kind of flips and changes and reconfigures the reclining female. I call it disorientalizing it, because she reclaims the female body as a site of agency and self-expression, and she's the subject rather than just an object.
Yeah, and I think the agency of the female gaze here is really important because, it's a reclamation of control over her own body, but, also political agency as well from someone who's in exile. And that brings us to our final exhibition, Leonora Carrington Dreamweaver, because of course, Leonora Carrington, as we mentioned at the beginning of the program, was also a woman artist in exile. So Gannit, can you tell us a little bit about this exhibition, please?
Well, that's truly a pleasure. I'm very, very excited that we were able to get, whereas Surrealism's Then and Now is based almost exclusively on art collection pieces, which is incredible. Leonora Carrington, they're all loans, they're all from private collections, and they're all rarely seen. So we're really thrilled and feel very fortunate. So Dreamweaver highlights Carrington's versatility as she explored a wide variety of mediums. So we have works in tempera, gouache, acrylic, oil, pencil, pen, fiber, so prolific and so versatile. We also have many drawings that show both preparatory sketches for paintings and murals, but also as separate works. And it shows we have things that are from when she was 17 drawings, and then works towards the end of her life. And she lived to 94, so long, long life. The show really reveals the complexities of this extraordinarily creative woman. She called herself, and I quote, a female human animal, describing herself through feminist ecological perspectives. So her work embodies, I'm gonna put the first drawing on so you can look at it while I speak. So Carrington's work embodies her inquisitive nature and unbounded imagination. She was born into a wealthy, kind of nouveau riche Anglo-Irish family, and spent most of her life trying to free herself, liberate herself from conventions and gendered restrictions that were imposed upon her by society. Born in 1917, so you can imagine. Her rebellious spirit was nourished by her Irish grandmother, mother, and Nanny Kavanagh, and they encouraged her immersion in imaginary worlds, initiated her interest in Irish fairies, folklore, and mythology, which we'll see in a few examples. So from a very early age, she was sent to schools with nuns, and they expelled her from all the schools, saying, this child is unable to learn or to play. So she found refuge in literature and art, and she started drawing and writing from a very early age and convinced her parents, uh, once she was expelled from these convent schools, to send her to art school. And she went to London and Florence, etc. At 19 was a turning point because her mother gave her Herbert Reed's 1936 book on surrealism. There was a surrealism exhibition that inspired her. And she just decided that she was, at 19, she was going to go to Paris and join the Surrealists. She met Max Ernst, had a 3-year intense love affair with him that was cut short by the war, and by his incarceration, first by the French, then by the Nazis. Now, then she experienced a series of very traumatic events. She had a severe mental breakdown, was forcibly institutionalized in Spain, finally just escaped war-torn Europe by marrying a Mexican diplomat. And she settled in Mexico, as you said. She had to relocate. So again, these double exiles that we see for Mona Hatoum, for Have Karaman, and for Carrington, from England to Paris and France, and then throughout Europe, Spain, Portugal, to Mexico, where she moved there in 1942 and lived the rest of her long and very productive life in her adopted homeland. Her compositions and imagery are inspired by this biography, by folklore, by mysticism, by religions, by myths, by the occult, and they really take us into multi-dimensional journeys that seek to unravel the world's most profound mysteries. And if we look into her work with patience and trust, then we really go on these voyages and journeys. Yeah.
And we've been looking at this beautiful drawing, which inspired the title for the exhibition. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So I took the title for Carrington's exhibition from this amazing drawing, which is one of my favorite works in the whole show. And almost like the linchpin for me of the show. There are other works that are bigger, that are more colorful, etc. But these are very, very delicate pencil markers. And you see, that she wasn't just interested in magical worlds. Her art is magic. Just these pencil lines kind of morph into this beautiful face that is crowned by a mane of wild hair. The figure's intense gaze looks at her hand. It's fanned figures, she is the weaver and she holds a single thread. I have another detail here. She's looking at this single thread that's a single line. It's a pencil line. So the thread of the weaver and the line of the draftswoman create this dream, which is this imaginary creature that's a hybrid creature. And if you want to look at eyes, look at her eyes, look at this eyes, and it's unbelievable. Now, she's left-handed, and so was the artist. She was ambidextrous, but she often painted with her left hand. And I find that this is a symbolic self-portrait of the artist. The weaver is the artist. She creates with lines just as the weaver creates with a single thread. And then they weave, they create, they imagine, they envision all these new worlds that are beyond the real, which is what the word surreal means.
I love the title of this exhibition. I think that Dreamweaver is such a beautiful metaphor for creativity.
Hmm.
And I also love that the exhibition, it works on multiple levels because the exhibition also includes this amazing woven tapestry.
Yeah. So we're very lucky to receive this wool tapestry that's part of a series of tapestries that uh, Leonora created. Um, and before we talk about the tapestry, I wanted to just say that it's a hybrid creature. She calls it a griffin, but you see that it's made from plants and animals and has a humanoid thing. And this could be not just plants, but also the moon. So all these different elements that merge together into this hybrid being. Um, it's just remarkable. But there's another facet to this because Carrington created tapestries for over a decade, and it was a collaboration with a family of serape weavers from Chinoncuac, which is an Aztec village. You know, they lived in her house for about 10 years. She said they had a beautiful loom, and she would draw these large drawings and they would transfer it into fabrics. And you think about this transformation, it's like alchemy. You take an idea from your head, you make it into a drawing, and then you weave it into this object. So transformations and transfigurations are something. And we're really, really lucky to have this opportunity.
Yeah, and as you were talking about this hybrid creature, I think what I really appreciate about Leonora Carrington's hybrid creatures is that they seem like a way for her to crystallize her interest in all these different mythologies and all these different beliefs. And the way that she combines these different esoteric religious traditions into this really cohesive worldview, I think are what makes her work so dense and feel so mysterious. And looking at her work, you get the feeling that you're like looking at many different dimensions at once. And we have another great example of this.
We do. This is one of the most complicated works that we have in the show. And it shows exactly what you were talking about, Maddie, and I view her each composition as a portal to that transports us into mesmerizing worlds and alternative dimensions. And I wanted to quote the British poet who was one of Carrington's earliest supporters, Edward James, who wrote, and I quote, "The paintings of Carrington are not merely painted, they are brewed. They sometimes seem to have materialized in a cauldron at the stroke of midnight," end of quote. And, you know, in Mexico, she, along with Remedios Varo and Cationa, her two close friends, all three refugees, all three surrealist, amazing women. They were called the three witches sometimes. So it's like she was practicing magic as she was working. And this is an example of what you said, you know, because it amalgamates numerous esoteric systems of belief and different vocabularies. So sueño, dream in Spanish, relates it directly to surrealism, where they were supposed to paint their dreams that were a kind of uh, porthole into your unconscious. But the subtitle Nefesh as the soul in a state of sleep. So again, sleep and dream are related, but Nefesh is the Hebrew word for soul. And there are different words that are used in the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. So she's thinking about different concepts of the soul as part of the divine dimension. You also have Egyptian elements here that relate to life and death. You have astronomical elements up in the what looks like a sky. You see all these different color-coded places that are both like overlaid, intersecting worlds, but also the four elements, the air, fire, earth, and water. And look at this incredible hybrid creature. I just want people to look very, very carefully at each work, because the more you look at it, the more you find these creatures, these symbols. And then you have a fifth dimension here with the horseback figure moving. It's like a uh, uh, taking the four elements and moving on to another dimension. You also have these elements that relate to life and death and the composition of the world. And for me, each composition requires time, attention, and kind of trust on the part of the viewer, and a willingness to enter these mysterious realms, mystical realms that she takes us onto.
And I think we have one last piece to show, which incorporates Irish mythology as well.
Well, that's true. And this title, this is an incredible work. And we're very lucky to have both the painting and the preparatory sketch. And it relates directly to things that she learned about Irish mythology, the and not just the title, but here the captions, the inscriptions read, the chair, which is the throne, the Irish throne, Dagda Tuata de Danann, which is Tuata is so the children of Danu, Tuata de Danann, are the divine dynasty, the third divine dynasty in Irish lore. And Dagda was the father deity, but Danu was the mother goddess. And she's associated with a lot of the symbolism here, but also with the sun that opens up as a flower. And you see all these things, the chair morphing into other elements. I also want to move to here. It's almost like she's painting with light rather than with paint. And something is swirling here. You have the egg that transmutes into a rose. And the egg is a ubiquitous symbol of birth and transformation, central to many different cultures and occult beliefs. We have another smaller egg here with two hands. I tell you, you stand before each work and you will find more and more elements within them. And so here we have this truly incredible summary of things that she learned from her mother, her grandmother, Nanny Kavanagh, about Irish myths, about birth and rebirth. By the way, the Irish fairies lived in a world called Otherworld. And isn't that what she paints for us? Isn't that what the Surrealists were also wanting to do? And she's so generative. I think it's important for me, Maddie, to add something that we haven't discussed, and that is that the role of women in the Surrealist movement was the male macho, I have to say. Surrealists often saw women as femme enfant, which means like child women that are intuitive and close to the earth, and as muses. And there's one quote that I'm going to paraphrase now that Carrington said, and she said, "I was never anyone's muse. I was too busy freeing myself from my family and learning how to become a painter." So she is nobody's muse. She is her own muse. she herself had this incredibly rich, these rich worlds and these talented ways of visualizing these worlds and bringing them to us through her prolific creative oeuvre. And she saw a lot of them through a Jungian lens. So she saw the connections between the different esoteric beliefs. Um, and yeah, I think we have to end. So
It's so sad.
perhaps
It's been so enjoyable, but I think we wanted to end quickly by showing one image from each exhibition. So we have the chair, which we just discussed. We have this Hugh Hayden untitled sculpture, and we also have this Andre Carthage photograph.
Tish, yeah. So these are three works of chairs and seated, either seated figures or absent figures that you can find in the three exhibitions. You can see that they all have the surreal turn, they all respond to the surreal impetus that Maddie and I have been discussing with you for the last hour, but among ourselves for many months. We see Hugh Hayden's ebony chair. It's a school desk, but it's hard to inhabit. And you have the dodo bird. So it's a hybrid of a chair and a bird. It's made of ebony wood, but also has the extinct Black magazine, Ebony, at the bottom. We could talk about it forever. It's an incredible piece. We have the esoteric Irish lore inspired Leonora Carrington, the chair, the throne, um, hybridized with the sun, with all these mystical symbols. And then Andre Kertész from a photographer that was working with the surrealists, showing this strange space and weird, I don't want to use the word weird, but kind of stretched and imagined reality of bodies in a seated position, but melting. Some people look at that and think of Dali and other artists who see things melting, but we thought it might be fun to end with three chairs and invite us to come sit with us at the Rose Art Museum and look at these exhibitions personally.
And, as you can see, they're all very different, as you said, but, each artist is using their own visual vocabulary and their own imaginations to explore these worlds beyond the rational.
Right, right.
So, Gannit, do you want to share any closing thoughts with us to sum it up?
Um, okay. So we noted that the official surrealist movement was founded in 1924 in Europe, but the rise of Nazism, fascism, and the onset of World War II, um, um, you know, all of this in the 30s and 40s forced many of the surrealist artists and intellectuals into exile. And as they scattered across the globe, some in Mexico, as we saw, but some elsewhere in the US, they carried their radical ideologies and practices with them, planting seeds for surrealist thought far beyond the European origins. And the movement's ethos transformed as it encountered new geographies, cultural contexts, and it ensured the persistence of some of the central tenets. So, the cohesive surrealist community that Breton envisioned was fractured under the weight of war and displacement. The movement's influence continues to resonate to this day. And, this surrealist turn, I think, surges periodically in to the 21st century because it reflects an enduring desire to probe the mysteries of life. And we think that in times of chaos and fragmentation, when rational perspectives fail to explain human complexities, artists and human beings and philosophers turn to hidden terrains and invisible truths, and they use surrealist forms of expression to decipher the enigma of existence through art, because the rational mind and the governments we have in place fail us time and again. So I think our time is up, Maddie. It's 8 o'clock. Do you want to invite people to our opening?
Yeah, I mean, first I wanted to say thank you, Gannit.
Well,
Thank you
thank you,
for this
Maddie, for
wonderful
talking with me.
conversation. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope that you'll join us again to come see these very rich exhibitions in person starting next week. And we're having an opening celebration next Wednesday, January 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to have music. We're going to have tarot card readings with a reproduction of a deck designed by Leonora Carrington. And they'll be read by Salem's own high priestess of drag, Sammy Witch. So it'll be a lot of fun. And we hope to see you all then. And thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Maddie, for organizing this. Thank you, Madeleine, for the technology. And thank you all for spending the evening with us. We hope to see you next week at the opening.